Your support keeps these stories alive. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell.
My name is Daniel. I'm 37 years old, and until recently, I thought I had built a life that would finally give me peace. I bought my house with my own hands, sweat, and sacrifice, a modest but comfortable place valued at around $300,000. It wasn't just brick and wood to me. It was the symbol of years spent working double shifts, sacrificing vacations, and skipping nights out with friends so I could squirrel away enough to own something of my own. No one gave me a cent for it. Not my parents, not an inheritance, and certainly not my wife. It was mine, through and through. When I first met Julia, she seemed supportive of everything I was trying to accomplish. She admired my drive, or so I thought. We married after 2 years of dating, and I moved her into my house. She didn't put a single dollar toward the mortgage, the renovations, or the property taxes, but I didn't complain. That's what marriage was, right? Sharing what you had. The problem started small, like a crack in the foundation you don't notice until the whole wall begins to lean. Julia had always been close to her parents, especially her mother, who carried a permanent air of superiority. They visited constantly, sometimes unannounced, making subtle remarks about how bare the guest room looked or how cold the living room felt without certain decorations. I brushed it off at first. After all, they were family now, but soon their presence became suffocating. They began to speak of the house as if it were already theirs. Her father would say things like, "When we retire, this back porch will be perfect for us to sit and drink our morning coffee." I'd laugh awkwardly, not sure if it was a joke. Her mother once criticized the kitchen cabinets and added, "If this were partly our place, I'd already have them replaced." The worst came one Sunday evening. We were sitting at dinner, Julia, her parents, and me. Out of nowhere, Julia put down her fork and said, in a tone that felt rehearsed, "Daniel, I think it's time we made this house truly ours. I want my parents added to the property deed." At first, I thought she was joking. My fork froze halfway to my mouth, and I just stared at her. "Excuse me?" I asked. She didn't flinch. "It only makes sense. They've been such a huge part of our lives, and this house should be a family home. Our family. I think you should add their names to the title." I swear, I nearly choked. Her parents looked smug, like they'd been waiting for this exact moment. My chest tightened, and my vision tunneled. I asked, trying to keep my voice calm, "Why in the world would I give away ownership of my house to your parents? Did they pay for it? Did they put a single cent into this place?" Julia looked offended, as though I had just insulted her honor. "It's not about money, Daniel. It's about respect, about recognizing the role they play in our lives. Don't you want to show them how much they mean to us?" Respect? That word tasted bitter in my mouth. Respect, in my mind, was earned, not bought with signatures on property deeds. Her parents sat there in silence, their eyes fixed on me, waiting for my answer. I remember putting my fork down slowly, deliberately, like a man laying down a weapon before a fight he doesn't want to start. I looked her straight in the eyes and said, "No, absolutely not. This house is mine. It was mine before you, and unless we build something together from scratch, it will never belong to anyone else." The atmosphere grew tense enough to cut with a knife. Her father muttered something under his breath about selfishness. Her mother dabbed at her lips with a napkin, smirking like she had known all along I wouldn't bend. Julia's face turned red with fury, but she didn't say another word that night. After dinner, she accused me of humiliating her in front of her parents. She said I was prioritizing money over love, property over marriage. I told her it wasn't about money. It was about principle. If she couldn't see that, then maybe we had a much bigger problem than I realized. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my stomach knotted, wondering how the woman I married could so casually suggest giving away the very thing I had built with my own blood and sweat. It was the moment I first thought this marriage might not survive. The days following that dinner felt like living in a pressure cooker. Julia's silence was louder than any argument we had ever had. She barely spoke to me, and when she did, her words carried a sharp edge. At first, I thought she would calm down, realize how absurd her request had been, and maybe even apologize. Instead, she doubled down. 3 nights later, I came home from work to find her sitting at the kitchen table with stacks of papers. At first, I thought they were bills, but then I saw the legal forms spread across the wood. Property transfer documents. She had gone to the trouble of printing them out, already highlighted, with sticky notes marking where signatures should go. My name stared back at me in bold, waiting for ink that I dropped my briefcase, my pulse spiking. "What is this, Julia?" I demanded. Her voice was cool, rehearsed. "It's the next step, Daniel." I spoke with a notary. "If we do this together, it's just paperwork." A gesture. "My parents aren't trying to take your house. They just want to feel secure, to know they have a place in our lives." I laughed, but it wasn't out of humor. It was the kind of laugh that escapes when you can't believe what you're hearing. Secure? "Julia, they have their own house, their own lives. This is my property, mine. Why are you so obsessed with tying them to it?" She slammed her hand on the table, rattling the documents. "Because they're my parents, Daniel. They gave me everything growing up. The least you can do is honor them. Why is that so hard for you?" Her words hit me like darts, but underneath the anger, I heard something else, desperation. It was as if her love for me had become conditional, dependent on this sacrifice. The next week became a blur of manipulation and pressure. Her parents showed up unannounced more frequently than ever. I would come home from work to find her father pacing my backyard as though he owned it, or her mother rearranging my living room furniture without asking. Every time I protested, Julia would glare at me like I was the one out of line point one evening as I was fixing a loose tile in the hallway. Her father crouched beside me. His voice was low, conspiratorial. "Listen, son, you got a good thing here. Family isn't about contracts or bank accounts. It's about trust. If you trusted my daughter, you'd add us to that deed without hesitation. Think about your future with her. Do you really want to risk losing her over a piece of paper?" I set down my tools and stared at him, tried to control my temper. "With all due respect, this isn't about trust. It's about ownership. I bought this house. I paid for it. And no one is going to take that away from me." His eyes narrowed, and I could see the resentment simmering there. From that moment, I knew they had turned me into the villain of their family story. Julia's tactics escalated after that. She stopped cooking, stopped sharing a bed with me, started locking herself in the guest room when she was upset. Once, during a particularly heated fight, she screamed, "If you loved me, you'd do this. You're proving that you care more about bricks and wood than about your wife." I shouted back before I could stop myself. "If you loved me, you wouldn't ask me to sign away my life's work to people who have no claim to it." The silence that followed was deafening. For the first time, I saw in her eyes not love, not hurt, but calculation, as if she were already deciding whether I was worth the fight. That night, I lay awake again, staring at the same ceiling I had worked so hard to own, wondering how the woman who once promised to build a future with me could side so strongly with her parents to be why then the cracks were no longer hidden. They were wide, gaping, and impossible to ignore. I wasn't just fighting for my house anymore. I was fighting for my dignity, for the right not to be bullied into surrendering everything I had worked for. And deep down, I started to accept a truth I didn't want to face. If Julia couldn't separate her marriage from her parents, then this marriage was already doomed. The breaking point didn't come all at once. It built up slowly, like storm clouds rolling in from the horizon. I could feel it in the air, thick and heavy, every time Julia spoke to me with that cold edge in her voice. Every time her parents walked through the door as though they owned the place, that tea all came to a head one Friday evening. I had just finished a grueling day at work, my hands still sore from hours of lifting and hauling, my shirt clinging to me with sweat. I wanted nothing more than a shower, a meal, and some peace. But when I walked through the front door, I found Julia waiting in the living room, her parents seated like judges in a courtroom. Her expression was calm, too calm. That scared me more than her shouting ever had. "Daniel," she began, her voice firm, "we need to resolve this tonight. My parents deserve to be recognized as part of this home, and I won't keep living in limbo. I've given you time to think, and now I need an answer. Either you add their names to the property deed," or she trailed off, but her meaning was clear and why pulse pounded in my ears. "Or what, Julia?" I asked, though I already knew. Her father leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, like he'd been waiting for his cue. Son, you're a good man, but you're being stubborn. Family's compromise. You want to stay married to my daughter? Then show her you respect her family. I stood there, my fists clenched at my sides, trying to keep my voice steady. With all due respect, sir, this is not a compromise. A compromise is deciding which side of the bed to sleep on or what color to paint the walls. This is me signing away ownership of my home. That's not compromise, that's surrender. Her mother sniffed, her lips curling into a smug smile. Maybe you shouldn't think of it as surrender, Daniel. Maybe you should think of it as an investment in your marriage, in your future. That was it. I couldn't hold back anymore. An investment? I barked, my voice echoing off the walls. Do you know how many years I worked double shifts to afford this place? Do you know how many nights I skipped meals just to save for the down payment? This house is my blood, my sweat, my tears. And you think I'm going to just hand it over like a gift? No, absolutely not. Julia's face darkened, her jaw tight. So that's it? You're choosing a building over your wife? Over your marriage? The word stung, but I forced myself to stand tall. No, Julia. I'm choosing self-respect. I'm choosing not to be manipulated into giving away everything I've built. If you can't understand that, then maybe we're not fighting for the same future. Her silence was worse than any scream. She looked at me with eyes I barely recognized, cold, distant, almost resentful. For the first time, I realized she had already made her decision long before that night. The days that followed were unbearable. Julia stopped speaking to me altogether, except in clipped sentences when absolutely necessary. Her parents continued to appear uninvited, whispering in corners with her, throwing me side glances filled with contempt. I started feeling like a stranger in my own home, the walls closing in on me. One night, I overheard her on the phone with her mother. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. It was impossible not to hear her voice echoing down the hallway. He won't budge, Mom, she said, her voice shaking. I don't know what to do. Maybe this marriage was a mistake. Those words gutted me. For years, I had believed we were building a life together, but in that moment, I realized she had been building something entirely different, something that revolved around her parents, not us. When she came to bed that night, I couldn't even look at her. I lay awake staring at the ceiling again, but this time the thought was louder, sharper, impossible to ignore. I can't live like this anymore. The next morning, I told her plainly, Julia, if your love for me depends on me giving away my home, then I think we both know this marriage is over. Her face didn't crumble into tears like I expected. Instead, she gave me a long, cold stare, then turned and walked out of the room. That silence told me everything. The ultimatum had been given, and now the end was no longer just a possibility. It was a certainty. The morning after I gave Julia my answer, the house felt different. It wasn't just quiet. It was hollow, like all the warmth had drained out overnight. She didn't sit down for breakfast with me. She didn't even offer her usual cold remark about the way I buttered my toast. Instead, she left the house early without saying where she was going, her footsteps sharp against the tile floor, the front doors slamming with finality. I sat alone at the table, staring at the steaming cup of coffee in front of me. For the first time, the house that I had poured my life into didn't feel like home. It felt like a battleground. That week, everything unraveled. Julia became a ghost in my own house. She stopped coming home at regular hours. Sometimes she wouldn't come home at all, staying at her parents' place for days. When she did return, she walked past me as though I didn't exist, her silence a punishment sharper than words. The only evidence of her presence was the faint scent of her perfume lingering in the hallway. I tried once more to reason with her. One evening, when she came through the door after midnight, I stood in the living room waiting. Julia, I said, my voice low, tired, we can't keep going like this. If you want to work through this marriage, we need to do it together. But I'm not signing that paper. That's not love. That's extortion. She didn't even flinch. She tossed her purse on the couch and crossed her arms. Then I guess you've already made your choice, she said, her tone icy. You've chosen this house over me. Over us. I felt my chest tighten, anger flaring. Don't twist this, Julia. This isn't about choosing a house. It's about refusing to let your parents own a piece of me. If you can't stand by me in that, then maybe we never had a marriage at all." Her eyes narrowed, and for a split second, I saw something ugly flash across her face, something I had ignored for years. Entitlement, possession, control. She stormed off to the guest room, slamming the door so hard a picture frame rattled on the wall. The next day, I came home from work to find her parents' car in the driveway. I walked in and froze. They were sitting at my dining table, flipping through documents, as if the house already belonged to them. Julia was in the kitchen, whispering with her mother. When she saw me, she straightened, her jaw set. "Daniel, I've spoken to a lawyer. If you won't willingly add my parents to the deed, then I'll be seeking other options. Don't think you can just push me aside." Her words cut like knives. I could feel my blood pounding in my temples. "Other options?" I snapped. "You think you can scare me into handing over my house? This isn't your parents' property. It isn't yours either. It's mine. And if you think some lawyer is going to change that, you're out of your mind." Her father stood, squaring his shoulders at me like he wanted to intimidate me. "You're making a mistake, son. Marriage is about sacrifice. You're too proud to see that." I stepped closer, meeting his glare. "Sacrifice is one thing. Surrendering everything I've worked for is another. This ends here. Get out of my house." The silence that followed was thick and dangerous. Julia's face twisted in fury, her mother shaking her head in disgust. But eventually, they left, their footsteps echoing through the hall like a threat. That night, Julia packed a bag. She didn't say a word, didn't look at me, just threw clothes into a suitcase and stormed out. The sound of the door slamming behind her was like a gunshot, final and irreversible. I sat in the living room for hours, the suitcase's absence echoing louder than its presence ever had. For the first time, I let the truth settle fully in my chest. My marriage was over. The days that followed were a blur of paperwork and silence. Julia filed for divorce within the week. She demanded half of everything, even though she had never contributed a dollar to the house. She wanted equity, furniture, even part of my savings that I remember sitting in the lawyer's office, the fluorescent lights buzzing above me, as he explained the fight ahead. "She has no legal claim to the property deed," he reassured me, "but she can make this process hell for you. Are you prepared for that?" I nodded, though my throat felt tight. "I've been living in hell for months," I muttered. "I'm ready for whatever comes next." And just like that, the battle shifted from the emotional war inside my home to the cold, calculated war of courtrooms and legal documents. But deep down, beneath the anger and betrayal, I felt something else stirring for the first time in months. Relief. Relief that the charade was over. Relief that I no longer had to beg for respect that should have been given freely. Relief that I could finally start reclaiming my life. Even if it meant losing my wife, the unraveling was complete. The marriage was dead, and now I was left standing in the wreckage, determined not to let them take another piece of me. The divorce dragged on for months, each hearing like reopening a wound I thought had already begun to heal. Julia's lawyers came at me with every angle they could, claims of emotional investment, shared life contributions, even suggesting that her parents had spent money that should count as equity. None of it was true, and deep down, I think even Julia knew it. But this wasn't about truth. It was about punishing me for refusing to bow. Every time I stepped into that courtroom, I reminded myself, this is why you fought, Daniel. This is why you said no. Because if you had given in once, they would have taken everything, piece by piece, until there was nothing left of you. Her parents were at every hearing, sitting behind her like shadows, whispering in her ear during recesses, glaring at me with disdain. They wanted to break me. They wanted me humiliated, stripped of the one thing they could never buy, my independence. But slowly, painfully, the tide began to turn. The evidence was clear. My house was purchased years before Julia and I married. The deed had my name alone, and every receipt, every mortgage slip bore only my signature. The judge, though patient with Julia's side, could not ignore the facts. The day the ruling came down, I remember standing in that sterile courtroom, my heart hammering. The judge's voice was steady, almost indifferent. The property in question remains solely the possession of Mr. Daniel Carter. The petition to add additional parties to the deed is denied. In that moment, the weight of months, years even lifted from my chest. I closed my eyes and exhaled, a sound that felt like freedom. Julia didn't look at me when it was over. She gathered her things, her parents flanking her like bodyguards, and walked out without a word. That was the last time I saw her. In the weeks that followed, I adjusted to life alone again. The silence in the house, once suffocating, became a comfort. No more slammed doors. No more whispered conversations behind my back. No more feeling like a stranger in my own home. The walls that had once felt like a prison now felt like protection, a fortress I had defended with every ounce of strength I had left at IT wasn't easy. Nights were long, and loneliness has a way of creeping in when you least expect it. Sometimes I'd glance at the empty spot in the closet where her clothes once hung, or the unused coffee mug she had left behind. But then I'd remind myself of the choice I made, and why did I chose to keep my dignity. I chose not to surrender everything I had worked for. I chose myself for once instead of bending until I broke. And slowly, I began to heal. I went back to my routines, working late, fixing up the house, even inviting old friends over for barbecues in the backyard. For the first time in years, I could breathe freely in my own space, no longer looking over my shoulder, no longer waiting for the next argument point one evening. As the sun set behind the roof I had fought so hard to protect, I sat on the porch with a glass of whiskey in my hand. The quiet hum of cicadas filled the air, and it struck me then, the marriage was gone, but I was still here. The man who had built this life brick by brick was still standing. Julia once accused me of choosing a house over her. Maybe in her mind that was true, but to me, it wasn't about a house. It was about respect. It was about refusing to let love become a weapon used to strip me of everything I had earned. That I didn't just save my house, I saved myself. And as I looked out over the yard, the weight of those words sank in with a strange, bittersweet peace. Sometimes the greatest freedom you can buy is the one you already own.